Station pressure reducing. The classic way of doing it has been to have an underground chamber. Now, what's shown here on this drawing was actually a package where it was split, so you had an upper chamber and a lower chamber, the lower chamber having all the valves mounted into it, so it would be easy enough to install on grade. Classically, a ladder, a small valve on one side, and the small valve hopefully no larger than a 2-inch or a 3x2, which is a nice combination, with strainers ahead of each valve to keep the rocks and dead bodies out, and yeah, rocks will show up. And this one shows external above grade gooseneck vents. I would not go that route. Far better to, as we mentioned earlier, you can have a kiosk that has your electrical service in for lighting and stuff like that. Any instrumentation, any control or whatever, if you're tying into the valves that way, with vents at either end, one with pressurized and one simply a return. That arrangement, you can have good ventilation for the chamber and not such a big deal. The ladder, one of the problems with a below grade station with a ladder is if the ladder ends below grade, which it pretty much almost has to, you've got a problem getting from the ladder onto grade, and you probably end up on your hands and knees as you crawl your way off it because you got nothing to hold on to. Throw in a plug for a Bilco ladder up model LU2. What it does is bolt to the top two rungs of the ladder and has a pull part that extends up. You simply grab it, it's counterbalanced with a spring, you pull the thing up and it locks. And it's sturdy, you can come up nice and gracefully. To retard the thing or retract the thing, there's simply a little T handle you pull up on and down it goes. Nice piece of equipment. If you get into triplex stations, then you may want to be thinking a very large chamber or above grade. And with triplex, of course, making access to the valves can be a little trick. You know, the old bit you crawling over to one. So as with pump arrangements, you may want to consider an elevated header, trench-mounted header, or balcony with access to the units. Now, below grade block and bleed isolation. There is a concern sometimes that if you've only got a single isolating valve at each end of the station, inlet and outlet, if that valve fails and you've got a valve, say a pump valve open or control valve opened up, that you could flood the station quickly and possibly drown people, etc., etc. So a way around that is to have block and bleed, which is basically, in addition to the inside valves, just inside the wall of the station, outside having isolating valves again, say gate valves or whatever, that are buried and operated with T handles from above, you know, socket type arrangement, so that you can go down and open those valves, and then within the station itself be able to bleed the water that's trapped between the two of them. In doing so, rather than have a big valve expose a big amount of water if it fails, you've got the drain valve being about the only connection to water in that event. Now, the drain valve being relatively small, so a 2-inch valve, 50 millimeter, is not going to flood the station that quickly. Again, more spec, and I would recommend that that valve, rather than be a cock, which is easily kicked full open and you can get a fair bit, be a non-rising stem gate valve. That way, if you kick it accidentally, you're not going to get a lot of water through. Now, because of concerns over confined space entry, which with proper ventilation and proper block and bleed, I don't think is such a big concern, there's been a trend towards, at least locally, above grade pressure reducing stations built. Now, above grade in a building is no problem other than needing air release vents at the end. But other than that, it's beautiful. What has been pushed is the idea of putting them into a kiosk. Now, the problem with that, as you can see, they get crowded and servicing becomes a bit of an issue. Also, security, if anybody opens up the kiosk, breaks into the kiosk, which can happen. And here's another drawing of photo of one. They look nice, but I don't think I'd want to be the one having to work on them. Anyway, another disadvantage of an above grade kiosk is that if it gets hit by accident by a car, um, severe damage can be done. That is the very end of all these presentations. If you want to get in touch with me, there's my snail mail address and email address. Um, Love to hear from you. And if interested, I should mention that I do have the standardized mechanical and electrical specifications that I utilized back before retiring. I'd have to put on a USB flash drive and forward to you by mail, and they'd be an Apple Pages format, but you can relatively easily convert that to Microsoft Word. A general review would be appropriate, and listed suppliers would have to be revised for whatever area you're located in. The only request I would have, um, I would appreciate if, in that case, a souvenir of your company or the area you live in if you're outside of British Columbia. And that is the end of it. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed and I hope you've learned something from it.